The scent of freshly baked bread usually filled our small kitchen on Saturday mornings, a comforting warmth that mirrored the laughter between us. It was a ritual as predictable and cherished as the sunrise. He'd be at the counter, humming off-key to some obscure jazz tune, his broad shoulders slightly hunched over the newspaper, while I'd fuss over the coffee, making sure it was just strong enough to kickstart our weekend. The morning sun would stream through the window, bathing the worn wooden table in a golden glow, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, hopeful spirits. In those moments, over burnt toast and lukewarm coffee, with the sound of his quiet contentment filling the space, I truly believed our ordinary life was extraordinary. It was a tapestry woven from countless small, precious threads, shared glances, inside jokes that nobody else understood, the comfortable silence that spoke volumes. His name was Alex, and his laugh, deep and resonant, was my favorite melody. It wasn't loud or boisterous. It was a warm, rumbling sound that always started in his chest and bubbled up, crinkling the corners of his kind eyes. The way his hand fit perfectly in mine, a silent promise, was a feeling I carried with me always, even when we were apart. He had this habit of leaving little notes for me, on the fridge, tucked into my book, or sometimes just a hastily scrawled message on a napkin. Always simple, always affirming, always bringing a smile to my face. He knew exactly how I liked my tea, even down to the precise shade of milk, and he'd always remember to grab my favorite obscure brand of biscuits whenever he saw them. It was these tiny, almost imperceptible acts of devotion that built the foundation of our world. Our evenings were often spent curled on the couch, the soft glow of the lamp creating an intimate cocoon, reading side by side without needing to speak. Sometimes he'd read aloud to me from a book of poetry, his voice a balm, turning simple words into profound truths. Other nights, we'd talk for hours, dissecting the day, dreaming about the future, our voices low and hushed, as if we were sharing secrets with the universe. We dreamed of a small cottage by the sea, of endless adventures, of growing old together, our hands still intertwined. He had a way of looking at me not just with his eyes, but with his whole being, that made me feel utterly seen, utterly loved, utterly home. Life wasn't without its small challenges, of course. There were bills to pay, occasional disagreements, the usual ebb and flow of existence. But with Alex, everything felt manageable. He was my anchor, my compass, the steady beat to my often erratic rhythm. Every mundane chore, every grocery run, every traffic jam seemed less irritating, less weighty, simply because he was there, experiencing it with me, often making a wry comment that would dissolve my frustration into laughter. We'd walk through our neighborhood hand in hand, pointing out budding flowers or commenting on the changing leaves, finding beauty in the everyday. It felt like an endless summer, even when the rain fell. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, especially when he was sleeping beside me, his breathing soft and even, a flicker of fear would cross my mind, that such perfect happiness couldn't possibly last. It was a fleeting, almost superstitious thought, born of a deep gratitude that bordered on disbelief. A silly worry, I would tell myself, pushing it away like a persistent fly. How could something so real, so tangible, so profoundly ours, ever truly vanish? Life felt like a calm, wide river flowing towards a beautiful, predictable horizon. I never imagined a dam could burst. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Not with a crash or a bang, but with the insidious quiet of a dying signal. The world outside my office window was vibrant, sun-drenched, humming with the familiar rhythm of the city. People walked by, laughing, oblivious. But in that instant, as the doctor's strained voice delivered the words, everything went monochrome. The vibrancy drained out of the light, the hum of traffic became a distant, muffled buzz. A hollow silence filled the line, then shattered into 1,000 pieces inside my head. It wasn't just words, it was a detonation, tearing through the carefully constructed piece of my life. My hand, still holding the phone, felt suddenly alien, disconnected from my arm, from my body. The receiver slipped, but I didn't register its fall, only the cold, stark realization blooming in my chest. It was a dream, I told myself. A terrible, vivid dream. Any second now, I'd jolt awake in our bed, Alex's steady breathing a comforting counterpoint to the quiet night. I'd reach for him, his warmth a familiar anchor. But the chill in the air, the way my knees buckled, the sudden, profound weakness that flooded every limb, it was too real. My mind, usually a whirl of thoughts and plans, became a blank canvas, then a screaming void. I remember the sensation of falling, though I was still standing. Falling through a trapdoor I never knew existed, into an abyss of disbelief. Each breath I took felt sharp, inadequate, as if the air itself had become thin and brittle. The vibrancy of moments ago, The mundane beauty of the Tuesday afternoon now seemed a cruel, mocking illusion. It was a before and after, a line drawn with agonizing finality, and I was on the wrong side of it. My world, once a kaleidoscope of bright, hopeful colors, had collapsed into a single, suffocating shade of gray. Food tasted like ash. Every bite was a chore, flavorless and dry no matter what it was. The vibrant greens of fresh vegetables looked flat. The juicy reds of fruit seemed faded, as if the very colors had dulled in my eyes, leached away by the overwhelming gray of my internal landscape. The laughter of strangers, once a background hum of life, now felt like a cruel, mocking sound, sharp and alien, a reminder of a joy I could no longer access. The gentle hum of the refrigerator, the distant sirens, even the rustle of leaves outside, all sounds were either excruciatingly loud, grating on raw nerves, or else faded into an indistinct drone, swallowed by the roar of silence in my own head. My skin felt perpetually cold, no matter how many blankets I piled on, and the softest fabrics felt rough, abrasive, a constant irritant. The curtains stayed drawn. Days blurred into weeks, marked only by the shifting light that stubbornly tried to seep through the edges of the heavy fabric. The apartment, once a haven of shared warmth and laughter, became a tomb. I rarely left the bed, sometimes not even bothering to change out of the clothes I'd slept in. The outside world felt distant, a rumor I had no desire to verify. The only conversations I had were with the echoes in my own mind, fragments of Alex's voice, snippets of our memories, playing on an endless, agonizing loop. I'd replay moments, dissecting every word, every gesture, searching for something I'd missed, some clue, some way to rewind the tape. But there was nothing. Just the echoes, growing fainter, yet more painful with each repetition. My phone, a constant companion before, lay forgotten and dead in a corner, its vibrant screen now dark, reflecting nothing. Sleep became a battlefield. When it came, it was fitful, haunted by vivid, cruel dreams where he was alive, then gone again in a flash, jolting me awake with a silent scream stuck in my throat. Waking hours were a heavy fog, thick and oppressive, making even the simplest tasks feel monumental. My limbs felt like lead, each movement an immense effort. My head throbbed with a dull ache, a constant companion. There was a gnawing emptiness in my stomach, not hunger but a void that no amount of food could fill. I was perpetually exhausted, yet unable to rest, trapped in a paradox of overwhelming fatigue and restless despair. My body felt heavy, too heavy for my spirit, which felt utterly hollowed out, a mere shell of the person I once was. The world continued to spin, but I had somehow fallen out of its orbit, drifting aimlessly in a desolate, color-drained space. Every song on the radio felt like a cruel, twisted joke. A melody Alex had hummed, a lyric that reminded me of some inside joke we shared, would blast through the speakers of a passing car or drift from a neighbor's window, and instantly my chest would seize. It wasn't nostalgia, it was a physical blow, a sudden, sharp ache that left me breathless. Each familiar street corner in our neighborhood, once navigated with easy familiarity and the comfort of shared presence, now screamed his name. The park bench where we'd eaten ice cream on sunny afternoons, the bookstore where we'd spent hours browsing, even the grocery aisle where he'd always reach for that specific brand of coffee, every single place was a monument to his absence, a stark reminder of what was gone. Our home, the sanctuary we had built together, became the epicenter of my torment. Every empty space where he should have been, his side of the bed, the missing warmth of his mug on the counter, the silence where his footsteps used to fall, was a gaping maw swallowing me whole. His scent lingered on his favorite sweater, on his pillow, a cruel phantom limb that offered a fleeting, agonizing comfort before dissolving into nothingness, leaving me gasping for the impossible. I'd pick up a book he'd been reading, his bookmark still tucked between the pages, and the sight of his familiar handwriting in the margin would send a fresh wave of despair crashing over me. It felt as though his ghost wasn't just in my memories, but woven into the very fabric of our life, now painfully visible only to me. The old dreams we'd meticulously crafted, the ones that once shone like guiding stars, now felt like distant, impossibly cold points of light. The cottage by the sea, the endless adventures we'd planned, the future we'd so vividly imagined, they were no longer beacons, but ghosts of possibilities, taunting me with their emptiness. What was I fighting for anymore? What was the point of tomorrow, if it held no promise of his presence? The very act of waking up felt like a betrayal of the oblivion I craved, a forced return to a world that had lost all meaning. Purpose had evaporated, replaced by a vast, echoing void where once there had been shared aspirations and unwavering hope. My own identity, so intertwined with his, felt fragmented, unrecognizable. I was simply remaining. I did try. In the early days, pushed by well-meaning friends or the relentless logic of survival, I made some failed attempts at coping. I tried to force myself out, to see friends who stood by, their faces etched with concern. But their well-meaning words felt like cotton in my ears, muffled and distant, unable to penetrate the thick wall of my grief. Their smiles, though genuine, felt foreign, alien, as if they belonged to a different world, a different time that I could no longer inhabit. I'd nod, offer monosyllabic answers, and inwardly count the seconds until I could retreat to the blessed silence of my solitary apartment. I tried to lose myself in work, in the routine that had once felt comforting. But the numbers on the spreadsheets blurred, the words on the screen swam, and my focus would shatter into 1,000 pieces with every passing minute, pulled back into the relentless current of my pain. I tried going for walks, seeking solace in movement, but the familiar streets only magnified his absence. The world outside felt too loud, too bright, too alive, a stark contrast to the quiet death within me. Every effort to get back to normal felt like pulling against an invisible tide, utterly exhausting and utterly futile, only serving to highlight the impenetrable depth of my struggle. It wasn't a grand revelation, no sudden bolt of lightning or miraculous awakening. It was something far smaller, far more mundane, yet utterly profound in its simplicity. Just a stray cat that appeared on my doorstep one rainy morning, its fur matted and damp, its eyes wide, a startling shade of green against the gray of the day. It simply sat there, patiently, silently, as if it had always belonged. For the first time in months, that persistent, gnawing emptiness in my gut shifted, just enough to allow a flicker of something other than pain, responsibility. It wasn't about Alex, it was about this small, vulnerable creature shivering on my porch. I didn't want to engage, didn't want to open the door to anything new, but its silent persistence chipped away at my inertia. I found myself reaching for an old bowl, filling it with water, then rummaging through the back of a cupboard for some old, forgotten cat food. The act was clumsy, my movements stiff, but the cat's gentle purr as it ate, a tiny, vibrating engine of life, was a sound I hadn't realized I desperately missed. That small act, that tiny crack in the dam of my despair, was the first breath of air I'd taken in what felt like an eternity. The cat, whom I started calling Pip, became my quiet shadow, a gentle reminder that the world continued to turn, that some things still needed care. Its soft fur against my hand, the almost imperceptible warmth of its body as it curled beside me on the couch, were tactile anchors in a world that had felt formless. Picking up the phone to call my sister felt like lifting a mountain. Each digit I dialed was a monumental effort, a battle against the overwhelming inertia that had rooted me to the spot for so long. My thumb hovered over the call button, heavy with dread. What would I say? How could I explain the cavernous emptiness, the constant ache, the guilt of simply existing? My throat felt constricted, dry, as if refusing to form the sounds. But Pip, curled on my lap, let out a soft, inquiring meow, nudging my hand with its head. It was enough. The sheer, physical difficulty of pressing that button, of raising the phone to my ear, was immense. And then her voice, familiar and warm, hit me, and for a moment, I could only make a choked sound. Each word was a struggle, thick and raspy, barely audible even to myself, but I said them anyway. "Hi," I croaked. "It's me." Simple, mundane, but it was a bridge, a hesitant step back towards the land of the living. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the world started to register slightly differently. The rain on the window suddenly felt cleansing, not just cold. Its rhythmic drumming, once a mournful dirge, now seemed to wash away some of the suffocating dust that had settled over everything. The sunlight, when it finally broke through the perpetual gray, no longer felt accusatory, it felt like a gentle invitation. I started to notice the intricate patterns of condensation on the glass, the delicate veins of a leaf outside my window, the way the light caught the dust motes dancing in the air, tiny beautiful details I had previously ignored. The simple act of brushing Pip's fur, feeling the soft texture beneath my fingers, was a small pleasure, a connection to something alive and warm. The scent of coffee, which had been unbearable before, began to lose its sharp edge. I still wasn't brewing it, but a neighbor's morning routine, drifting through the open window I'd finally cracked, no longer made me wince. Instead, it was a subtle reminder of routines, of continuity. Even the chill in the air, a constant companion of my despair, felt less hostile. It was simply air. Cold, yes, but real, tangible, reminding me I was still breathing. These weren't grand epiphanies, no sudden bursts of joy. They were tiny, whispered changes, like the first tentative shoots pushing through frozen earth, signaling that life, however painful, was still finding a way to persist. The first hesitant steps towards reconnecting with others were excruciating. Dinners felt like foreign rituals, awkward dances where I forgot the steps. I'd sit at my sister's table, surrounded by the loving chaos of her family, and feel a profound disconnect. The clinking of forks, the chatter of children, the easy laughter. It was a soundtrack to a life I no longer inhabited. I often found myself staring at my plate, unable to contribute, the food a bland prop in a scene I didn't belong in. My sister, bless her heart, would try to draw me in with gentle questions, but my answers were clipped, my voice a whisper. Each awkward silence that fell, though painful, was a tiny brick removed from the wall I'd built around myself. Slowly, painstakingly, the world outside began to filter back in, not as a bright, welcoming embrace, but as a series of small, manageable moments. Pip, my quiet companion, had opened a door. And through it, another possibility tentatively emerged. One afternoon, while aimlessly wandering through the apartment, my gaze fell upon a dusty canvas propped in the corner. It was an old painting of mine, unfinished, a landscape I'd started years ago. I remembered the joy, the complete immersion I used to find in blending colors, in bringing a scene to life. It felt like a lifetime ago. But a faint impulse, a mere whisper of curiosity, urged me forward. I dusted off my old paintbrushes, fingers clumsy, art rusty. The first strokes were stiff, uninspired. The colors seemed dull, resistant to my touch. But as I kept going, pushing through the frustration, a tiny spark ignited. The act of creation, however faltering, was a tether to something real, something that existed beyond the confines of my grief. It wasn't about beauty or perfection, it was simply about doing. Just as Pip's purr was a tiny engine of life, the careful mixing of blue and green, the whisper of the brush on canvas, was a quiet hum of existence. But healing, I was learning, was not linear. Just when I thought I was making progress, taking 2 tentative steps forward, a shadow would fall and I'd be pulled a step back. There were nights the darkness still swallowed me whole, thick and suffocating, just like in the early days. A familiar song on the radio, one that Alex used to sing off-key, could hit me unexpectedly in a grocery store aisle, freezing me in place, the world spinning. A sudden, sharp memory evoked by a stranger's fleeting gesture or a scent in the air could send me spiraling back to the raw, visceral pain of the first days. I'd wake up from a dream, breathless, reaching for him in the empty bed, and the profound, aching absence would crush me anew. The progress I thought I'd made would feel like a fragile illusion, easily shattered. On those days, the canvases would remain untouched, the curtains drawn once more, and Pip would sit patiently beside me, a silent, furry testament to the enduring presence of both grief and quiet companionship. These relapses were frustrating, demoralizing, but they were also a harsh, vital lesson. Healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about learning to carry its weight, even when it felt too heavy to bear. The art became my anchor, a quiet, solitary act of rebellion against the emptiness. I found myself drawn back to the canvas not out of joy, but out of a desperate need to translate the storm inside me into something tangible. My fingers, once clumsy, slowly regained their familiarity with the brushes. The colors I mixed were often muted, blues and grays dominating, reflecting the landscape of my soul. It wasn't about creating beautiful pieces for anyone else. It was a conversation with myself, a way to externalize the chaotic emotions that threatened to consume me. Each brushstroke was a release, a moment where the overwhelming pressure would lessen, if only for a few breaths. This solitary pursuit, however, eventually led me back to others. There was a small community art studio nearby, and one hesitant afternoon I signed up for a pottery class. My hands, more accustomed to the delicate touch of a paintbrush, struggled with the raw, earthy clay. It was humbling, frustrating, but also oddly freeing. In that class I met Clara. She was older, with lines etched around her eyes that spoke of a life lived fully, and a quiet wisdom that drew me in. She didn't press, didn't offer platitudes. She simply offered a knowing glance when my clay collapsed on the wheel, or a soft, encouraging word when I felt like giving up. Through Clara, I found my way to a local grief support group. The thought had terrified me for months, a room full of strangers sharing their pain. But when I finally walked through that door, I found not just shared pain, but shared understanding. I met David, whose wife had passed years ago, and Sarah, a young woman navigating the recent loss of her brother. Their stories, echoing parts of my own, brought a profound sense of validation. We didn't offer advice, we offered witness. We sat in silence, or we spoke, our voices trembling, sharing the unvarnished truth of our grief. It was in those moments, in the raw honesty of shared vulnerability, that new connections began to form. These weren't replacements for Alex. They were distinct, precious bonds forged in the fires of shared suffering and understanding. We built something new together out of that vulnerability, a quiet strength that transcended individual sorrow. As time continued its relentless march, I began to understand that healing didn't mean forgetting. It wasn't about leaving Alex behind or pretending he hadn't existed. Instead, it was about integrating the loss into my identity, weaving his memory into the fabric of the person I was becoming. The scars remained, deep and visible, not just emotional ones, but the subtle changes in my outlook, my priorities, my very perception of the world. They were no longer wounds that bled fresh pain with every touch. They were the roadmap of my journey, a testament to love, loss, and the incredible, often brutal process of human endurance. I started revisiting places Alex and I had loved, not with agonizing longing, but with a new sense of quiet communion. The pain was still there, a soft ache beneath the surface, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was accompanied by a profound gratitude for having known such love, for having shared such a vibrant life. His memory became a compass, not a chain, guiding me to live more fully, to cherish the fleeting beauty in each day, to seek out connection, and to extend kindness wherever I could. I still talked to him in my mind, sometimes aloud in the quiet of my apartment, sharing my day, my small victories, my continued struggles. The conversation had changed, but it hadn't ended. This new phase wasn't about closure, but about continuation. A continuation of love, transformed by grief, leading me to a deeper, more resilient version of myself. The day I finally decided to pack away Alex's clothes was a cold, gray Saturday, much like the one when I got the call. For years, they had hung in our closet, untouched, his scent slowly fading, yet their presence was a constant, almost suffocating weight. Each shirt, each pair of worn jeans, held a story, a memory I wasn't ready to face head-on. This was the deepest fear I'd harbored since the tragedy, confronting the tangible remnants of his life, accepting the finality of their stillness. My hands trembled as I opened the closet door, the familiar creak a groan in the silence. It felt like I was betraying him, erasing him, putting away not just fabric but a piece of my very soul. I pulled out his old flannel shirt, the one he wore when we went camping, smelling faintly of pine and wood smoke. My fingers traced the soft, worn fabric, and suddenly the memories weren't just echoes. They were a vivid, overwhelming torrent. I saw his smile by the campfire, felt his arm around me as we watched the stars. The pain, sharp and visceral, flared anew, twisting in my gut. I gasped, tears finally, uncontrollably, streaming down my face. I sank to the floor, clutching the shirt to my chest, every cell in my body screaming with the agony of his absence. But then something shifted. Amidst the overwhelming sorrow, a different sensation began to emerge. It was small at first, a tiny spark beneath the crushing weight of grief. A warmth, not just from the fabric but from within. Standing there, surrounded by the echoes of our laughter, of our shared life contained within these silent garments, I finally allowed myself to truly feel it all. The raw, agonizing grief, yes, the crushing weight of what was lost. But also, undeniably, the boundless love that had fueled those years. It was a love that hadn't vanished, a connection that death couldn't sever. It was still there, vibrant and profound, intertwined with the sorrow. And for the first time, in that raw, exposed moment, the grief didn't overwhelm me. It didn't swallow me whole. Instead, incredibly, it lifted me. The sorrow and the love were two sides of the same coin, inextricably linked. I cried deep, wrenching sobs that shook my entire body, but these were tears of release, of acceptance, not just despair. It was the deepest catharsis I had ever known. A profound realization washed over me. Alex wasn't gone because his clothes were in a box. He was alive in every single cherished memory, in every lesson he taught me, in every way he had shaped who I was. His love was a part of me, a permanent, indelible mark. A strange, quiet sense of lightness bloomed in my chest. The suffocating pressure eased. The world didn't become bright or carefree overnight, but the monochrome gray that had painted my existence for so long now had a faint, iridescent sheen. The edges of things seemed clearer, sharper. My perspective had subtly but irrevocably shifted. I wasn't defined by my loss, but by the love that had preceded it, and the strength I found in its wake. The grief was still present, a quiet companion that would likely walk with me always, but it no longer commanded my every breath. It was integrated, a part of my story, a testament to a beautiful, profound connection. I picked up another shirt, then another, folding them gently, no longer with dread, but with a quiet, reverent tenderness. This wasn't saying goodbye. This was saying, I carry you with me. The dust motes still danced in the morning sun, but now the light felt different. Softer, less harsh, almost inviting. The scent of bread still filled my kitchen on Saturdays, a ritual I'd carefully brought back, but now the laughter wasn't just a memory, it was my own, bubbling up spontaneously, or shared with new friends like Clara and David. Alex's favorite mug still sat on the shelf, not as a shrine to absence, but as a quiet, familiar presence. The empty chair wasn't just empty, it held the quiet memory of a love that shaped me, a foundation upon which I was building something new, rather than a void I constantly fell into. My hands, once trembling with grief, now moved with purpose, whether mixing paints on a palette or gently shaping clay on the wheel, each creation a quiet conversation with my evolving self. Life wasn't a steady climb out of the darkness, it was a winding path, still prone to unexpected dips and climbs. There were days when a familiar song, a forgotten photo, or even a sudden, inexplicable scent would still pierce through the fragile peace, bringing tears to my eyes. But these moments, while painful, no longer swallowed me whole. They were waves I could ride, emotions I could acknowledge and allow, rather than fight against. The difference was, now I knew they would pass and the sun would always find its way back through the clouds. My journey had broadened my world in ways I never could have imagined. I found myself reaching out more, not just to those who knew my story, but to strangers. I'd pause a moment longer to offer a genuine smile to someone struggling with heavy bags, or a quiet word of encouragement to a new, nervous face at the art studio. I'd find myself listening with a depth I hadn't possessed before, truly hearing the unspoken anxieties and quiet joys in others. In their eyes, sometimes, I recognized the echo of my past self, lost and alone, and it fueled a renewed capacity for empathy and connection. I started a small volunteer role at a local community garden, finding solace in the earth beneath my fingernails, in the slow, persistent rhythm of growth. Tending to the fragile seedlings, watching them push towards the sun, was a tangible reminder that even after barrenness, life finds a way. I wasn't trying to get over Alex. That idea felt alien, almost disrespectful. Instead, I was learning to carry him like a cherished, invaluable part of my being, into a new, unfolding future. This wasn't a happily ever after in the storybook sense. The ache was still there, a soft, familiar undertone to the symphony of my life. But it was no longer the dominant melody. It was woven into a richer, more complex composition, filled with new harmonies and surprising notes of joy. There was a realistic sense of ongoing hope and resilience, a quiet confidence that I could navigate whatever came next, carrying the love that had shaped me and the strength I had unearthed in its absence. Every sunrise felt like a new page, not a blank one, but one rich with possibility, still being written. And so, our journey through echoes of resilience comes to a close. This story, like so many others hidden in the quiet corners of the world, reminds us that even in the deepest valleys, where shadows seem to stretch endlessly, there are always pathways forged by the human spirit. They might be faint at first, barely visible, but they are there. It's a testament to the quiet power within us all, a power often only revealed when everything else has been stripped away. This journey has shown us that it's about finding the courage to move through, not around, the pain. To face the emptiness, to feel the ache, and yet to keep putting one foot in front of the other. It's about remembering that love, even when it's gone, leaves a profound and beautiful mark on our souls, a permanent imprint that shapes who we become. That love doesn't vanish, it simply transforms, becoming a quiet strength that whispers in the silence. And perhaps, most importantly, it reminds us that true resilience isn't about never falling, never breaking, or never feeling the crushing weight of sorrow. It's about finding the strength to rise again, even when your limbs feel like lead, even when the world seems monochrome. It's about carrying those echoes with you, not as burdens that drag you down, but as guiding lights that illuminate the path forward, reminding you of the love that once was and the capacity for hope that still remains. If this tale touched your heart, if it stirred something within you, consider leaving a quiet like to let me know. Or, if you know someone who might need to hear this message of resilience, please share it with them. And if you wish to join me on more journeys of the human spirit, into the depths of joy, sorrow, and everything in between, a subscription ensures you won't miss our next chapter. May your own echoes, those tender memories, the lessons learned, the love that endures, always guide you forward. And as you walk your path, through whatever seasons may come, may you always find the light in the deepest shadows, a quiet luminescence born of your own incredible resilience.